We're here today at Cheekwood Botanic Gardens in the newly restored Blevins Japanese Garden. It is spectacular. This garden offers lots of tranquil spaces and some really amazing views. We're going to take a look around and see some of the new plant material and the accessibility paths that it offers. When did this garden originally get established?
Philip, and thank you for being here. This garden became a vision of the community of Nashville and supporters of Cheekwood in the mid to late 70s.
Oh, wow.
And actually rose out of the interests of a women's group in the local Ikebana club. Okay. They were drawn to Ikebana because, unlike some of the other flower societies, plant societies, it was less based on competition and more based on just the free exchange of art forms, and kind of developed over a period of time. The original master plan was rendered by David Harris Engel, who is now regarded as one of the most significant Western designers of Japanese gardens and landscape architecture. And then Cheekwood took its time engaging Engel the whole way and developed Shomuen, the Japanese garden, over the 80s and 90s. And I believe the original grand opening was the early 90s, 1991.
Wow.
So it translates loosely to pine mist forest.
Okay.
And we do say that the Japanese garden is a Japanese or artistic abstraction of the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee.
Yeah, that's very cool. So it kind of has that, in a Japanese style, we got get our own little version of our local Appalachian Mountains right here in Tennessee. That's nice.
That's right, because you take someone very quickly out of a familiar Middle Tennessee landscape and transport them into this Japanese garden, but you also present them with something that they're familiar with and can relate to.
Yeah. So tell me, we're standing currently in the roji,
Yes.
which is kind of the introduction to the garden. Explain to everybody what a roji kind of is.
Sure. So roji, I understand, translates directly to dewy path and is meant to be a setup to the experience in other parts of the Japanese garden, commonly associated with a tea house or tea garden. Mm-hmm. So a roji in traditional Japanese garden design is always a conveyance, if you will. And that's definitely expressed here at the beginning of the experience in Shomuen, and is meant to, you're walking downhill, the path is crooked, includes some stairs, so it's meant to draw your attention inward and to the ground, kind of leave the woes of the world behind and prepare you for the rest of the experience in the Japanese garden.
Yeah, so it's kind of a full immersion experience is kind of what they're going for. That's really neat. One thing that definitely stands out to me in the Japanese garden is the plant material here.
We were lucky enough to work with garden designer, landscape architect Sadafumi Uchiyama, who is the curator of the Portland Japanese Garden, which is the preeminent Japanese garden in North America. So again, very much an honor. And not only did Sada render the master plan for this most recent restoration, he very generously shared all of his knowledge and experience, himself being a third or fourth generation gardener. And so he helped me to understand many things about Japanese gardens, but in my experience in Western landscape design and construction, you lay out the hardscapes, you define the fence line, you lay down the path, and then you fill everything in with the plant material, right? But Sada helped me to understand, in the Japanese garden, you want it to feel more like the plants were here first, and the path is kind of laid into the forest floor where the path should be. So that's something that we've tried to definitely achieve with the new planting. And unlike some of the other gardens at Cheekwood, where it is a little bit more, not encyclopedic, but featuring a greater diversity of plant material, the new installation in the Japanese garden is meant to be very dramatic in these large kind of consolidated sweeps.
What's some of your favorite plant material that's in the Japanese garden here at Cheekwood?
have to start with the Japanese black pines,
Right.
Pinus thunbergii, which we're very proud of and have always been a part of this garden. So we established that Shomuen has been featured at Cheekwood, an important part of Cheekwood, for several decades, and the Japanese black pines, as they're sculpted and very intensely managed, are a result of that period of time. So really a defining feature in the landscape. Other important elements, I mentioned that Shomuen translates to pine mist forest. We referenced the Smoky Mountains, clouds, fog. So another important element is the native Catinus, Catinus cujugrea, or smoke bush. And we've recently paired that with white cloud muley grass. So from one of the most prominent perspectives at the viewing pavilion, which you'll see, the Japanese Gardens presents a forced perspective across this mountain landscape, right? You're meant to see a landscape that feels much larger and deeper than it really is. So the Japanese black pines, as they've been manipulated, appear to be smaller in the foreground and then maybe larger trees deeper in the background of the garden. And then that Catinus with its flower and the muley grass kind of add the smoke to the rolling hills of the terrain. And beyond that, we also reached back in all of this. You mentioned, and thank you, that this was really treated as a restoration because, again, David Angle is historically significant. This is an historic garden at Cheekwood. And so one of our primary goals in the restoration was to honor that original design intent. So a lot of the plant selections reached back to the original planting plan, which we have on record.
Oh, awesome, yeah.
So planted around the pond, we went back in with a lot of flowering azaleas, gumpo azaleas.
Right.
So lots of whites and pinks with a few pops of red.
Okay.
Which is something that I would never do, Philip, anywhere else in the garden, white, pink, and red. But I was helped to understand that was appropriate here in the Japanese garden.
And they do flower for such a short time. It's kind of like a little mini burst of color, and then it's gone for most of the year.
Absolutely. And as I learned, the azaleas in Japanese gardens in a mountain landscape such as Shomuen are really not even featured for their flowers. They're sheared so closely, so they take these tight, compact forms that they're actually meant to be sort of additional boulder expressions. So to look and kind of read like more stones in the landscape, more so than the flowers.
Interesting. So I have to mention the bamboo forest.
Absolutely.
I feel like as kids, that's one of the most fun things that they see here at Cheekwood is the scale. One that I don't feel like people understand the scale of bamboo until you're actually in there also. So that makes it really interesting.
And it's built into the experience of the Japanese garden right behind the roji, as we discussed. So again, you start at the top of the hill. The roji begins to establish your frame of mind, narrow your perspective, which is even further compressed in the bamboo forest.
Another element that just stands out to me are the ginkgos in that courtyard. Those are really spectacular in the fall.
Absolutely.
When you get that burst of gold and they all drop at once.
And I get chills every time I think about that. That is one of my favorite moments at Cheekwood. The garden behind the viewing pavilion is carpeted with a bright green moss. And just as you said, when that yellow fall ginkgo foliage drops and falls on that green moss, it's just really wonderful.
Yeah. One aspect that really stands out in the Japanese garden is the placement of boulders. They seem very intentional and sometimes almost awkward on their placement, kind of standing upright. Can you comment about those?
Absolutely. And the use of stones in the Japanese garden is something that is done very, very intentionally. And quick story, if I may.
Sure.
We were honored to have this restoration supported by a Japanese ministry that supports the renovation of Japanese gardens outside of Japan. And garden master Hiromu Terashita came to Cheekwood in advance of ultimately the October project, the October mobilization. And he studied the dry pond at the base of the garden, and after 2 days handed me a map. And on this map it showed the location for 7 proposed boulders.
Wow.
Okay. And then I arranged for Terashita-san and the rest of his attaché to drive around to some of our local purveyors of stone to pick these boulders out.
Wow.
And Philip, if this was me, I would have stood there and I would have said, I think we need about 7 boulders. How many boulders can you get on a truck?
Right.
7, great.
Sure.
Send me 7 boulders in 2 months. Well, Terashita-san gets out of the van at J&R Garden and Stone, and we kind of lose him. He just scurries off into the boulders, and then we finally catch up with him, and after some period of time longer, he just starts pointing. He says, that's number 1.
Wow.
That's number 7. That's number 3 and 4. So here is this garden master, having spent 2 days in a foreign country in a garden that he's never been to before, studied the landscape very closely, decided exactly where he wanted to place additional stones, and then 20 miles away, upon seeing a stone, knew exactly where he wanted to put it in the garden.
Wow.
And I have no doubt exactly how he wanted to articulate that stone in the garden.
I do have to say, it shows that much attention to detail has been put into this whole garden. It's very peaceful. It feels natural and calm. Mm-hmm. It feels kind of very comfortable to be in at any point. Well, thank you again for showing us around the Blevins Japanese Garden here at Cheekwood.
Thanks for coming out, Philip. It's always good to see you and helping us to share this very beloved garden with all of our guests and the people across Tennessee.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel, and like us on Facebook.